those were pretty fun. I feel like we answered them pretty good, actually. Or
Yeah,
well.
we've been married for almost 2 years, and we had a period of long distance dating before then where we spoke like every day. I feel like long distance dating makes you talk even more than you would otherwise, potentially.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. I feel like we got to know each other really, really well because all we had, or pretty much, was talking. And it is long distance dating is pretty hard, but I think one of the benefits is that you get to know each other, or potentially have the ability to get to know each other super well.
yeah.
Versus, I feel like, and again, this is stereotype, it's not the case for everybody, but I feel like when you're in person all the time, you can almost like be doing stuff, but not talking.
Sure.
And maybe talking about like superficial things that like are in the moment, but maybe not like talking about the super deep things, the super obscure facts or whatever, about each other. I feel like on the topic of knowing your spouse, sometimes I feel that way even now, like now that we're married and we're together. Sometimes I feel like we've spent a whole week together and we've done stuff together and we've hung out, but we haven't
Yeah.
necessarily talked about like we've said like, oh, how was work? How'd it
Yeah.
go? Let me like how what happened today? And then we make dinner, we eat it, and then we play a game or watch a show or whatever, and then we go to bed. And maybe we don't spend as much time talking about like how have you been feeling? Like what's been on your mind? Have you been stressed about anything?
Sure.
Have you been, excited about anything? What are you thinking about? When you pray, what are you praying about? Like what's your focus? Like I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes those conversations are not being had as much. And then I'm like, wait, we haven't like I feel like we've talked, but we haven't like talked in a little bit. So then I feel like we try to do that. And I feel like when we drive, because we live pretty far from a lot of places, a lot of things, church, family, all that stuff. And so we drive quite a bit. And I feel like those times we talk about like a lot more stuff because we don't have any distractions really. And we're just driving and talking. And I feel like we've had a lot of really good conversations in those times. Again, I always go back to the point that the devil hates marriage, and when you
Yeah.
get married, he wants you to fail. And so he's going to do everything he can to distract you from like knowing each other and continuing to know each other and pursuing each other and all these things. And so sometimes, I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. It's not like we're perfect. Like we get distracted too by things and,
Yeah.
go, you know what I mean? And so I think you have to be intentional just about knowing your spouse and continuing to learn more about your spouse. Right?
Yeah. For sure. I mean, you read my mind. I was going to say intentional. I think when you're long distance dating, since things are so limited, you're consciously thinking about, okay, what are we going to talk about? And I remember in our early days we'd be like, hey, I watched this sermon, or hey, I found this list of different doctrines. Like, what do you believe in? What do I believe in? Or tell me about where you went to school. Or tell me about your job, or tell me about what you're going to do for what your career aspirations are, stuff like that. And since you're so limited, it kind of forces you to be very deep in one aspect of your relationship, which is communication. And not forces you, it gives you the opportunity to be opted in to that. And, we said like, hey, this is what we have. We're going to make the most out of it. But I think even if you're not long distance dating, you can still be intentional about it. You can say,
Yeah.
hey, let's go on a walk and let's just talk about what it was like for you when you were a kid and how you were raised and,
Yeah.
what was your childhood like. And just those little things, like you'd be surprised. Just a little bit of direction can lead to a lot coming out. You can see somebody in a completely different light. Yeah, so you're right. Just kind of being a bit more deliberate and about how you have conversations can make a big difference.
Yeah. And I think for when you are having those type of conversations, I think if one of the things that is really a tool that you can use that is a very powerful tool that a lot of people don't realize that they can use to have like more effective communication is the tool of silence. So when you're talking to someone like your spouse or maybe who you're dating, and you're, especially if you're talking about something very deep and maybe like personal and maybe even like has a lot of emotions attached to it for the other person, like giving them the room to answer you and have time, because sometimes, especially when you're beginning to get to know each other, maybe the trust is not as deep.
Yeah.
It can be hard to really try and figure out how to say different things, or even just to figure out how to say them in general, like how to figure out the words to like express what you're feeling or what you went through or whatever. And just being silent, not trying to fill in every moment with talk,
Yeah.
just being like, so say someone says like, oh yeah, my childhood wasn't good, like, oh, what do you mean, like, you want to share,
Yeah.
and then maybe say that the other person's like quiet, and you're like, say you're on a walk, like I'm like painting this story, you're on a walk and they're silent. Don't just be like, oh, la, 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 and anyways, give them some space. And if they don't want to talk about it, obviously, maybe that's not ready. But that tool of silence can do a lot in helping the other person open up and working towards you guys knowing each other better.
Yeah. Well, we learned that. I mean, especially when you have less cues. Like, say you're on a mobile phone call, and you don't have a video element. It's just the voice. You can't watch somebody's facial expressions. So sometimes that will give you a clue that somebody's thinking, or they're about to say something. But in the absence of that, sometimes that will force you to be like, well, you learn that skill, I think, over time. Or even if the other person just says, hey, like I was going to say something, but you interrupted me. Like I had a train of thought, but I didn't get to finish my train of thought
Yeah.
because you already butted in, and I can't remember what I was thinking about. So we went through that for sure. And I mean, even with a video call, it's still very imperfect. There's a lag, there's latency. There's no really substitute for live communication, but I think you do learn a lot of patience dealing with the technology, and the silence. Even the silence helps there. Even like, hey, it's lagging or it's buffering. It's like, hey, let me just wait a little bit instead of trying to keep on talking. And the other person has no idea what you said because like the network is bad. There's a lot of wisdom in what Susie is saying.
I think if you're in a relationship, especially if you're married, you should do everything you can to continue getting to know your spouse, because regardless of how well you think you know them, we are ever constantly changing creatures, and so you need to continually get to know someone. And it just builds intimacy, I think, in your relationship. And so doing like how I said, like whether it's, or like how you said, whether it's going on a walk or a long drive with, maybe no music or anything else going on,
Yeah.
or whatever it may be that helps it feel more comfortable for you guys to be able to talk or whatever. And asking those deeper questions that are not just like, oh, how was work? How was your day? But like, what are you afraid of anything right now? Is there like a fear or an anxiety that's on your mind lately? Or what have you been praying about? Have you been praying and seeking God for anything specific? Or is there anything that you're really excited about? Or like how we talk about, like, what are your goals for next year, whether that be financial or like in your career or spiritual or whatever it may be, like what are
Yeah.
your goals? What do you want to accomplish next year? Things like that. Like that's going to like prompt more conversation, and just, I don't know, I feel like it just builds a sense of intimacy and trust
Yeah.
between each other, you
Yep.
just feel closer to the other person.
It does for sure. And as you were saying, that just came to my mind that I think sometimes we're in love with this idea of conversations being so spontaneous and they just know the perfect thing to say without me asking them, that kind of thinking. And, I think what we're saying is like if you want to have a lot of intimacy, you can't rely on spontaneity or it just happened that we happened to speak about something that was very important. You can put deliberate steps in place to lead you in that direction. It doesn't happen by accident. It's I think I would just encourage that. Like, if you want a lot of intimacy or you want to grow in intimacy, you can take deliberate steps to go there and not just wait for the perfect time, that perfect time may never come. Sometimes it
Yeah.
might be an uncomfortable conversation,
Yeah.
but that's still a step towards intimacy.
Sure. Yeah, I think just sitting down and realizing that your spouse can't read your mind and like they might not know, you might have a very heavy burden on you, have a lot of anxiety or stress or fear about some certain thing, or even on the opposite end, have a lot of anticipation about something, and then you get upset because, oh, why doesn't my spouse get excited with me? Or why isn't my spouse asking me why I'm so stressed? Like, maybe you just hide it very well and they have no idea. Or maybe they're stressed out. Maybe they're anticipating something else and they're totally distracted because we're human, And if you just have these expectations that they should know, like, try to get to know me better, and yet not giving them the opportunity to do that, it's going to be a struggle, and you're going to have unmet expectations, and you're going to be disappointed, and it's going to put strain on your relationship. So you really should just assume that your spouse cannot read your mind at all. And if they do know you pretty well and they know something is going on, maybe that's great. But like, don't have those expectations because it can create unnecessary strain. And it just, yeah, it's not fun, I think.
Yeah, and there's been times when I remember saying this to Susie, that because I said this sentence this way, it means I'm feeling this kind of way. And like, as I was saying it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense because she's not inside of my head. Why would she know that? But I think we tell ourselves that stuff, like, she should be able to know that because I said this thing in a certain way, I'm obviously upset, and she should be coming to apologize or whatever, and it's that human life is not like that. I mean, even if she knows you're upset, why are you going to force her to apologize? That's not helpful either. You want to create a dialogue.
I think something that like helps a lot with just knowing your spouse, like just be transparent with them to the point that you might, if someone were to hear you, they might laugh because you might feel silly, but just who cares if you feel silly or it might seem embarrassing? Like, just be transparent. If you feel upset, go to the person and say, I feel upset. And then they might say, well, why do you feel upset? And you might say, I actually have no idea. I don't know, honestly. I just feel upset. I feel hurt by something you've done or said, but I can't really, and I can't, I don't know why. And then maybe through talking about it, you figure out why, and then you're able to deal with it versus not saying anything, assuming that they'll figure it out themselves when you can't even figure it out yourself,
Yeah.
and then apologize for it. And then it's just a mess. And like, if you just are more simple minded, really, it just makes things so much easier. Like, I remember specifically one time, which I think it should be okay to share, but I remember our first Valentine's together. We weren't together, but we were together, but like we were long distance. We hadn't had like a talk about Valentine's Day of like, oh, this is what I'm expecting, what I'm not expecting, whatever, our expectations. And I think I drew you a card. It was a very simple card or something, and I sent it to you saying Happy Valentine's Day. I think actually it was like Yoda, and I said Yoda-licious or something. Some dumb pun. Anyways, and then I didn't get anything back. But had not had that conversation. And to me, I was thinking like, well, everybody on social media says like Valentine's Day is like just for like hopeless romantics and like it's so dumb. And so I was like, well, I shouldn't expect anything because it's such a dumb holiday. But I was upset because I didn't get anything. And I had that expectation without even realizing I did. And I remember I think called later that day, and I was upset at you. And you were like, what's wrong? And I said, I finally was able to say, I am upset. And you were like, why? And I said, I actually don't know. But as we spoke, I realized like, I feel so dumb because I feel like I shouldn't have the expectation to want of receiving something, even something little. And yet I do. And so I didn't want to admit it because I was like, I feel dumb for having that expectation. But by talking about it and by being like, well, who cares if I sound silly? We were able to talk about it and be like, Valentine's Day, to some people, they could care less. But for me, I'd like having an excuse to be romantic. Yeah. And I want you to be romantic to me too. And so that's just an example of like, so through that, Bam was able to know me better and know like what I like and what I want and my expectations and things like that. And you just have to be willing to like let go of your pride, I think. I think if you want to know your spouse well, you cannot be prideful. You have to let that part of yourself go. Because if you're full of pride, you're going to have a wall up between each other. You know what I mean? You're going to have a wall that's not going to let you to know your spouse fully, I feel like.
You're right, and that's a lifelong journey. Because I mean, we're Christians, and we know a lot of Christians, and that's a daily consecration, or what's a better word? Like you have to give that, you have to confess that to God every day. Like, God, help me with my pride, help me with my self-perceived, you know, worth or value I give myself. Because I think that's the barrier. It's you value yourself to some extent where, well, I don't want to apologize. I don't want to say that I had some negative emotions about my spouse. You don't want to show the weaker sides of yourself. But ironically, it's sharing those weaker sides is what's going to make your bond stronger.
Yeah.
It might not make any sense for somebody watching, but we can testify to that. And we're young in this journey. We don't know much, but we can testify that it's those moments, like Susie said, like, hey, this might be weird, but I'm upset. And you may be the cause, you may not be, but I want you to know. And then just going from there, at least, okay, she's been transparent with me, and now we can, as a couple, talk about it. And now we're on the same page. I don't have to guess how she's feeling. I don't, because guessing can also lead you into trouble. But if you help each other out, like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and now we're like, okay, now we both know what's going on,
Yeah.
and the guessing game is gone.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it sounds strange saying that sharing your weaknesses can make you closer, but it really does. Because I think when you have a relationship and one side is like sharing their vulnerabilities and sharing what they're afraid of and sharing what they're not great at and where they're failing, and the other person might support them and love them and encourage them and not be ashamed that they're saying that and welcome it. But if that other person doesn't then share that as well, it feels very one-sided and imbalanced. And if you were to only share with me the times that you were happy and feeling good and showing your best side, where I'm showing you everything, even if you were to show me and do everything you could to say that you accept me and love me, if you don't then open yourself up and also show where you're weak and failing, I feel like that would like it would make it feel so imbalanced to the point that like there's an insecurity of like, well, how deep is this like trust and love because you're not willing to share that side of yourself with me, you know? And so you have to be willing to share it all to really know your spouse, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just trust that the other person will still love you and accept you. I heard a sermon where it was talking about Jesus when he goes to the and talks to the woman at the well. The first person that he talked like basically showed himself as Christ too, besides the disciples, obviously. And before he ever said that I am your savior and I can save you, he exposed her sin. He basically said, I know your sin. You're not like, I don't see you as someone that you're not. Like, I know who you are. You've had like this many husbands, and the person that you're with now is not even your husband. And the sermon was basically saying that if, like, basically Jesus, and I'm probably not saying it as good as the sermon, but basically Jesus was showing her that I know you and all the ugliness of you, and yet I can still save you, and I'm still here for you, and I love you. And he was basically saying, if there's even 1% of you that people don't know about, like in the ugliest 1% of you, but they know the 99% and they say they love you, the devil will still come and say, they don't know that 1%. If they knew that 1%, they wouldn't love you. So it's better just to let people know the 100% of you. And if they walk away, they walk away. But like, Lord willing, like you've married a godly person and they are still going to be willing to love you. And then that devil doesn't have that leverage on you to say, oh, if they only knew, they wouldn't love you. You know, it like creates a distance, like a distance between you that you might not even realize at first. Like, oh, my spouse
Sure.
says they love me. My spouse says they know me and they love me, but they don't really know everything about me, you know? And that really hit me because it was like there's all parts, everyone has something about them that they don't like and they don't want to show to people. But I think that is something that you should show to your spouse and like, because, and it might be hard, but, well, and hopefully you've talked about those hard things before you're even married, you know, but especially with God, I hope that people know that like God sees all that ugliness and he knows you and he still loves you. And we want to emulate, I guess, God's love. You know, I don't know. I feel like I kind of went on a tangent, but basically, it's good to like let your spouse know who you are because then the devil doesn't have leverage to say, to like put separation between you, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I was letting you cook. You're saying a lot of facts, a lot of truth there, and everything that I agree with. I mean, we've learned these things together, you know, on this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just say like sometimes it does take time. Okay, so if you in a relationship right now, or maybe even married, and you're like, well, I don't feel like we can talk about all the deepest, darkest things in our lives right now. It doesn't mean you have a bad marriage. It just means you're still growing in your intimacy.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to be discouraged.
No, but I think that, yeah, of course, everybody's on a journey, but I would encourage people that like to trust, to let trust grow in the relationship so that one day they can feel like they can share that and, you know, not be afraid.
Yeah, that's what you want to head towards for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I hope you guys liked this one. It was kind of a little more unscripted, a little
Yep.
more go with the flow, but I think there's a lot of truth in here. I mean, I feel like I'm relearning some lessons that we came across in the past, and definitely the intentionality piece is something that you can't really have enough of. So I think that's a good reminder for me. So we won't keep you any longer. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed. This is Bam. This is Susie.
Hi.
This is your Sweet Pea and Bam. The all I said is leave a comment if you want, what you would like to hear from us. We pray you are blessed. God bless.
God bless.
Bye.